The sound of the front door clicking shut sent a strange chill down my spine, though I had no reason to feel uneasy. It was just Laura coming home, same as any other evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to go through emails on my laptop, but really, I was just watching the clock. She was late. Again. Not by much, maybe an hour or so, but it had become a pattern, one I couldn't ignore anymore. I heard her heels tapping against the hardwood floor, a sound I used to love because it meant she was home. But tonight, I didn't turn around. Instead, I stared at the reflection in the darkened laptop screen and watched her move through the house like a ghost. She dropped her purse on the counter and let out a tired sigh, then headed straight to the bedroom without saying a word. No, hey, babe. No long day. Just silence. I let out a slow breath and closed the laptop. I wasn't imagining things. Something had shifted between us, and I was done pretending it hadn't. I pushed back my chair and followed her, walking slowly, listening. The bathroom door was open just a crack, enough for me to see her standing in front of the mirror, fixing her hair. That's when I noticed it, the faintest smear of lipstick at the edge of her jawline. Not hers. Laura never wore red lipstick. My pulse quickened, and I took a step closer, watching as she scrubbed at it with a tissue, her movements a little too frantic, a little too desperate to make it disappear. Where were you? My voice came out steady, but my hands were gripping the doorframe a little too hard. Laura froze for just a second before turning to face me, her expression smooth, practiced. Work ran late. Had a meeting with a client. She tossed the tissue into the trash, as if wiping away the evidence erased the truth. I told you this morning, remember? I did remember. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Laura was lying, and I knew it. It wasn't just the lipstick or the way she refused to meet my eyes. It was the way she smelled. Expensive cologne, something deep and musky that didn't belong to her. It wasn't perfume. It was a man's scent, clinging to her clothes like a confession she didn't mean to bring home. I forced a chuckle, shaking my head like I was the crazy one. Right. A meeting. With a client who wears men's cologne. Her face barely changed. Just a flicker of something in her eyes, annoyance, maybe? Or was it fear? Jesus, are you sniffing me now? She scoffed and turned back to the mirror, brushing her fingers through her hair like this conversation was beneath her. It's probably from work. People hug, you know? It's called being social. I stepped inside, closing the bathroom door behind me, leaving us alone in that tiny, tiled space where there was nowhere to hide. Who was it? Laura? I asked, my voice low, even. She let out a sharp laugh, one that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, come on. Don't do this. Do what? This. She waved her hands vaguely. The jealous husband routine. It's pathetic. Pathetic. That stung more than I wanted to admit, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and studied her like I was seeing her for the first time. The way she kept adjusting her earrings, the way her jaw tensed just slightly, the way she avoided looking at the laundry basket where I knew she had stuffed the blouse she didn't want me to see. A blouse that probably had more than just cologne on it. I exhaled slowly, nodding to myself. All right. That got her attention. She turned, brows furrowing. All right. Yeah. I pushed off the counter and opened the door, stepping back into the bedroom. You're right. I'm probably overthinking it. Laura hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she had just won or if she had walked into a trap. Good, she muttered, grabbing her makeup remover. But as I left the room, I already knew I wasn't letting this go. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening to the soft, steady rhythm of Laura's breathing as she drifted off, completely unaware that I was wide awake beside her. I thought about every little moment over the past few months that hadn't made sense, the sudden care she took in her appearance on days she claimed to be too busy for anything else, the way her phone was always face down when she set it on the table. The sudden change in how she touched me, like I was just another object in the house instead of the man she had once wrapped herself around every night. It wasn't one thing. It was everything, all of it piling up into something I could no longer ignore. And now, with the lipstick stain and the cologne, I knew I wasn't paranoid. I knew something was wrong. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had made up my mind. If Laura was lying to me, I needed proof. Real proof. The kind she couldn't brush off with another casual excuse. I waited until she left for work, watching her from the living room window as she pulled out of the driveway, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She didn't even glance back at the house. As soon as she was gone, I got to work. I started with the laundry basket in the bathroom, digging through her clothes until I found what I was looking for, the blouse she had stuffed in there the night before. I held it up to the light, scanning the fabric for anything unusual. It smelled like cologne, stronger than I had noticed last night. And then I saw it, a faint smudge just below the collar, a mark that wasn't quite makeup, not quite dirt. It was enough to make my stomach twist, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I moved to her closet next, checking the small space where she kept her handbags. The one she had taken out with her last night was still there, shoved toward the back. I pulled it out, unzipped it, and started going through the contents. Lipstick, compact mirror, receipts. I pulled them out one by one, my hands moving faster with every second. That's when I found it, tucked between two crumpled napkins, a hotel key card. The name of the hotel was printed in bold letters at the top, one I recognized because it was only 20 minutes from our house. I stared at it for a long time, feeling the weight of it in my hand. This was it. This was the thing that shattered any last hope I had that I was wrong. My chest felt tight, my breath uneven as I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until I knew everything. Not until I had seen it with my own eyes. That evening, when Laura came home, I acted normal. I asked her about work, made small talk over dinner, even laughed at a joke she told about her boss. She didn't notice the way I was watching her, the way I was memorizing every little detail about the way she lied to me so easily. When she said she was tired and was heading to bed early, I nodded and told her I'd clean up. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close before I grabbed my keys and left the house. I drove straight to the hotel. The lobby was quiet when I walked in, the kind of place that catered to business travelers and people looking for privacy. The receptionist barely looked up as I made my way toward the elevators. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I knew I couldn't just sit at home and pretend like I didn't have that key card burning a hole in my pocket. When I reached the second floor, I followed the numbers down the hallway, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. Room 214. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I slid the key card in. The light turned green. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, the air stale with the scent of cheap air freshener. But there were signs of life, an empty water bottle on the nightstand, a used glass by the sink, a crumpled receipt on the desk. I walked over, picking it up with steady hands. It was from the hotel bar, dated the night before, 2 drinks listed. Not 1. 2. I clenched my jaw, exhaling slowly through my nose. I had what I needed. I turned and walked out, my mind already racing through the next steps. This wasn't over. Not even close. I sat in the car outside our house for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The hotel room, the receipts, the cologne, the lipstick, it all ran through my mind like a movie I couldn't shut off. I wanted to believe there was another explanation, something that would make sense, something that would turn this whole thing into a misunderstanding. But I knew better. I had known for weeks. I just didn't want to accept it. Laura had been lying to me, smiling in my face, kissing me goodnight while carrying the scent of another man. And now, I was done pretending. I walked into the house, closing the door behind me a little harder than I needed to. The sound echoed through the hallway, and from the living room, I heard Laura's voice. "That you?" She sounded relaxed, comfortable, like she hadn't spent last night in a hotel bed that wasn't ours. I took a deep breath before stepping into the room, watching her from the doorway. She was curled up on the couch in her pajamas, her legs tucked under her, flipping through her phone like it was just another normal night. "Yeah, it's me." My voice was calm, steady, controlled. She barely glanced up, nodding before returning her attention to whatever was on her screen. "Where'd you go?" she asked, like she cared, like it mattered. I stepped further into the room, my hands in my pockets to keep myself from doing something I'd regret. "Out." That got her attention. She frowned, setting her phone down. "Out where?" I let the silence stretch, watching her face carefully. I wanted to see it happen. I wanted to watch her realize that I knew. Slowly, I pulled the hotel key card from my pocket and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. It landed with a soft slap against the wood, the logo facing up, clear as day. Laura's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. For a split second, I saw something fear, maybe? But she hid it quickly, reaching for the card like it was just a piece of junk mail. "What's this?" "You tell me." She turned it over in her fingers, feigning confusion, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her body stiffened just slightly. "I don't know what you're getting at," she said, her voice careful, measured. I took a step closer, towering over her now. "Don't insult me, Laura." My voice was lower this time, heavier. "I found it in your purse, along with the receipt from the bar. 2 drinks. Not 1. Her lips parted, and for the first time, she looked genuinely caught off guard. You went through my stuff? I laughed, shaking my head. That's what you're focusing on? Not the fact that you've been sneaking off to hotels like some teenager who doesn't know how to cover her tracks. She set the card down, crossing her arms. You're overreacting. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay in control. Overreacting? Are you serious? I leaned down, bracing my hands on the coffee table so I was at eye level with her. Then tell me, Laura. Tell me who you were with. Tell me why you've been lying to me. Tell me why you smell like a man who isn't me when you come home at night. She swallowed, but still, she kept up the act. I wasn't with anyone. I went there alone. I clenched my jaw, my patience thinning by the second. Right. You booked a hotel room for no reason, ordered 2 drinks for yourself, and then just what? Sat there staring at the walls? I needed space, she said, the words coming too quickly, too defensively. I've been stressed. Work has been insane, and I just wanted a night to myself. I pushed off the table, standing straight again. You expect me to believe that? She sighed, rubbing her temples like she was the victim here, like I was the one making things difficult. I don't know what you want me to say, okay? You're acting like I did something horrible when all I wanted was a break. And yeah, I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. I stared at her, really stared at her, and all I could think about was how easy this was for her. How easily she spun the lies, twisted the truth, made herself look like the one who was suffering. I had spent 10 years with this woman, built a life with her, trusted her, and now, I didn't even recognize the person sitting in front of me. You know what? I said, stepping back. Forget it. Laura's eyes narrowed. Forget what? I'm done. I turned and started walking toward the hallway, toward our bedroom, because if I stayed there any longer, I wasn't sure what I'd do. She stood up quickly. Done with what? I stopped, looking at her over my shoulder. With this. With you. Her face paled, but she didn't say anything. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she thought I'd cool off and let it go like I had all the other times I ignored the red flags. But this time, I wasn't looking for excuses. I wasn't looking for a way to fix something that had already been broken. This time, I was looking for a way out. I didn't pack a bag that night, didn't storm out in some dramatic exit. I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. I needed to be smart about this. Laura had spent who knows how long lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back, and treating me like a fool. If she thought I was just going to walk away quietly, she was dead wrong. So I acted like nothing had changed. I went to bed in the same house as my cheating wife, woke up in the same bed where she probably lay thinking she had gotten away with it, and went about my day as if everything was normal. But every second, every moment, I was planning. I started by gathering everything I needed. Laura thought she was careful, but she wasn't careful enough. She deleted messages, sure, but people always slip up. I went through our shared laptop, checking the cloud backup she forgot existed. I found just enough. Fragments of deleted messages, call logs, timestamps that lined up perfectly with the night she was working late. Then I checked our bank statements, scrolling through charges I had never noticed before. Fancy restaurants, small cash withdrawals, ride services, all pointing to the same thing. She wasn't just meeting someone in that hotel room, she was treating him. And I wasn't about to let that go unanswered. At work, I acted like nothing was wrong. I laughed at jokes, sent emails, handled meetings, all while making phone calls in between. The first was to my lawyer. I told him everything, laid it out clearly. I wanted a divorce. I wanted to make sure I wasn't screwed over, and I wanted to hit her where it hurt. He told me exactly what I needed to do. First, I needed more evidence. Hard evidence. He gave me the number of a private investigator, someone who specialized in cases like mine. I called him immediately. By the next morning, he was on it. Over the next week, I played the role of the oblivious husband while the investigator did his job. He tracked Laura, followed her after work, took photos of her with him. A guy named Eric. I didn't recognize him at first, but when I saw the pictures, something clicked. He wasn't just some random guy. He was one of her coworkers, someone she had introduced me to once at a company event. I remembered shaking his hand, remembered how he had looked at Laura just a little too long. And now, here he was, meeting her in bars, getting into cars with her, walking into hotel lobbies with her. I waited until I had everything, texts, photos, proof that she had been using our money on him. Then I put my plan into motion. I wasn't going to scream at her, wasn't going to let her cry and beg and manipulate her way out of this. I was going to take my time. That Friday, I made dinner reservations at a restaurant she loved, one of the ones she had taken him to. I told her I wanted to talk, that I had been thinking about what she said the other night, that maybe we needed a fresh start. She took the bait easily, all too happy to believe that I was still the idiot she thought I was. She got dressed up, put on perfume, even held my hand in the car like she hadn't spent the past few months stabbing me in the back. We got to the restaurant, sat down, ordered drinks. I let her talk first, let her spin whatever story she had come up with to justify herself. She said she was glad we were trying, that she had been feeling distant but wanted to reconnect. She smiled at me like she meant it. And that's when I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, and slid it across the table to her. She frowned, looking down at it. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then she did. Her face drained of color as she scrolled, her fingers trembling as she saw the texts, the call logs, the photos of her and Eric walking into the hotel. I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. You were saying? She didn't speak at first, just stared at the screen like she could somehow make it all disappear if she looked long enough. Then she set the phone down carefully, took a deep breath, and did the one thing I didn't expect. She laughed. A short, bitter laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. So this is what we're doing? She asked, her voice lower now. You're spying on me? I tilted my head, amused by her audacity. Spying? No. Gathering facts? Yes. Unlike you, I don't base my life on lies. She exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. What do you want, huh? An apology? You want me to cry and tell you I regret it? I shook my head. I don't want anything from you, Laura. Not anymore. But you're going to listen to me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. That's from my lawyer. You'll find divorce papers inside, along with a very generous offer considering what you've done. You sign them, you get to walk away without things getting ugly. You try to fight me on this, I will take every single piece of evidence I have and make sure everyone sees it. Your boss, your family, your friends. And Eric? Well, let's just say his wife will be very interested in these photos. Laura's eyes widened slightly. Oh, you didn't know? I smirked. Yeah, he's married. Seems like you two have a lot in common. She clenched her jaw, looking away. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out a way out of this. But there wasn't one. Not this time. I picked up my drink, took a slow sip, then set it down. You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought I'd just accept whatever story you fed me. But you were wrong, Laura. So now, you have a choice. Sign the papers, or watch everything around you burn. For the first time that night, she looked scared. Not angry, not annoyed. Scared. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She knew I meant every word. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and gave her one last look. Dinner's on you, I said before walking out, leaving her there with nothing but the mess she had created. Laura didn't sign the papers immediately, which didn't surprise me. She always had a way of stretching things out, making situations more complicated than they needed to be, like she was testing how much she could get away with. For the first few days after the dinner, she acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just handed her a way out of the mess she created. She still moved through the house the same way, still left her coffee cup in the sink instead of washing it, still let the bathroom steam up after her showers like she had no reason to feel ashamed. But I saw the way her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking, the way she hesitated before speaking, the way she kept glancing at her phone like she was waiting for a message she knew wouldn't come. She knew I had boxed her in. There was no escape from this, and she was slowly starting to accept that. On the fourth night after the restaurant, I was in the kitchen pouring myself a drink when I heard her footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around at first, just focused on the slow trickle of liquid filling the glass, waiting. She leaned against the counter, silent for a few moments, then let out a breath. You really want to end it like this? I finally looked at her, taking in the slight redness around her eyes, the way her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. You ended it, Laura. I'm just making it official. She scoffed, shaking her head. Don't do that. Don't act like I did this all on my own. You weren't exactly present, you know. I took a slow sip of my drink, watching her carefully. So this is my fault now? She sighed, rubbing her forehead. I didn't say that. No, but you're implying it, I said, setting my glass down. Go ahead, say it. Tell me how I drove you to cheat, how I forced you into hotel rooms with him, how I made you lie to my face every single day. She looked away, her jaw tightening. I don't know what you want me to say. I stepped closer, just enough to make sure she really heard me. I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to sign the damn papers. Her fingers curled slightly against her arms, and for the first time, I saw something real on her face, not anger, not annoyance, not that cold indifference she had perfected over the past few months. This was something else, something closer to fear. And what if I don't? I exhaled through my nose, nodding slightly. Then I make good on my promise. I send everything to your boss, to Eric's wife, to everyone who matters. And you can deal with the fallout. Her breathing hitched slightly, but she covered it up quickly. You wouldn't. I tilted my head. You really think that? Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. She was calculating, trying to figure out if I was bluffing, but she already knew the answer. I had never been the kind of man to make empty threats, and she had pushed me too far to expect mercy now. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. So that's it. I nodded. That's it. She was quiet for a long time, her fingers tapping lightly against her arm, her lips pressed together in a thin line. Then, finally, she nodded. Fine. I didn't say anything as she turned and walked away, heading toward the bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a drawer opening, followed by the rustling of papers. When she returned, she was holding the divorce papers in one hand, a pen in the other. She sat at the kitchen table, flipping to the last page, then hesitated, staring down at the lines waiting for her signature. You ever wonder what would have happened if you just talked to me? She asked, her voice quieter now. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I did talk to you. You just stopped listening. She didn't argue. She just pressed the pen to the paper, signed her name, and set the documents down in front of me. Then she stood, walked past me without another word, and disappeared down the hall. I stared at the papers for a few seconds, then picked them up, flipping through them one last time. It was done. There was nothing left to say. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the silence wasn't just the absence of sound, but the absence of everything that had once filled it. Laura hadn't left yet. She was still packing, still moving through the house as if it hadn't been ours for the past 10 years. I didn't help her. I didn't ask if she needed anything. I just let her do what she had to do, keeping my distance, waiting for the finality of her departure to settle over me. I had thought this moment would feel like victory, that watching her leave with nothing but her bags and the consequences of her own choices would bring me some kind of satisfaction. But now, standing in the kitchen, staring at the divorce papers on the table, all I felt was a dull, quiet emptiness. She walked in, carrying the last of her things, and set them down by the door. She didn't look at me right away, just adjusted the strap of her bag, exhaling slowly. So that's it then. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. That's it. She glanced at the papers on the table, her lips pressing into a thin line. You didn't waste any time filing. I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. Why would I? She let out a soft laugh, but there was no humor in it. Right. No point in dragging it out. I watched her carefully, waiting for her to say something else, to make some last-minute attempt at explaining, justifying, or blaming. But she didn't. She just stood there, shifting her weight from foot to foot, like she was waiting for me to say something first. When I didn't, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know what you want me to say. I set my glass down with a quiet clink. I don't want you to say anything, Laura. She looked away, nodding slowly, like she had finally run out of ways to prolong this. I guess I just didn't think it would end like this. I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. How did you think it would end? She hesitated, and for the first time, I saw something in her expression that wasn't just guilt or frustration, it was regret. Real, actual regret. I don't know, she admitted. I thought maybe we'd fix it. I scoffed, shaking my head. You thought we'd fix it? After everything? She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. I wasn't thinking. No, I said, my voice even. You were. Just not about us. She winced, but she didn't argue. She just stood there, shifting under the weight of everything she had done, everything that had led to this moment. I pushed off the counter, stepping closer but keeping just enough distance between us. Do you love him? She flinched like I had hit her, but she recovered quickly, exhaling through her nose. It wasn't about that. I tilted my head slightly, watching her. That's not an answer. Her jaw tensed, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to say anything. Then, finally, she sighed. No, I don't. I nodded, letting that settle. Then why? She hesitated again, then let out a slow, tired breath. Because I was selfish. Because I wanted something that wasn't mine to take. I studied her for a moment, searching for any sign that she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. But this time, she was telling the truth. It didn't change anything, didn't undo the damage, but at least it was honest. I took a step back, nodding toward the door. You should go. She hesitated only for a second before picking up her bags, adjusting them on her shoulder. She turned toward the door, then stopped, looking back at me. I know you hate me. I shook my head. No, I don't. She frowned slightly, confused. Then what? I exhaled, feeling the last remnants of anger slip away, replaced by something calmer, something final. I just don't care anymore. She didn't respond. She just nodded, turned, and walked out the door. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't wait for the sound of her car driving away. I just stood there, in the middle of what used to be our home, letting the weight of it all settle over me. And for the first time in months, I felt free.